spend billions on research and innovation. As we just heard, we have ever-evolving global challenge. So how can we make that research and innovation map better onto the problems, onto the challenges, so they're solved or simplified or at least shrunk in scale? It's a bit more complicated than that, but that is the essence. How do we step up or embrace those challenges, to use the Minister's words? We're going to have some suggestions and I think some provocations now in our opening address, and very glad to give it. We have the European Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation, Carlos Moedas.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, Minister Helmar Knudsen, dear Alan, thank you so much for your words. And I think that Sweden has been a great example of that openness. And so I was glad to hear from you. Professor Jazesanov and all the esteemed guests here today. Science is far from a perfect instrument of knowledge. It is just the best we have. And in this respect, it's like democracy. These are the words of Carl Sagan, a man who was a brilliant communicator of science. His words remind us that science, like democracy, will change, develop, and transform. But the direction it takes will always rest in our hands, shaped by our desire to contribute to a better world, one in which we can all prosper. Last year, when we started the new Commission, we had to decide what direction to take as policymakers for science and innovation, so that European research, science and innovation can contribute to solving global challenges of our times, while equally ensuring the continued progress and prosperity of European society. Two things were very clear from the beginning. First, our actions must always reflect European values of openness and diversity. And if we are serious about using European research and innovation for something greater than our own gain, this is what it's about, openness and diversity. And second, we have to embrace change, try new things, and be willing to take risks if we want European research and innovation to remain at the forefront of modernity and economic growth. It is therefore with great pride that I look back on 1 year gone by and consider how the new Commission has worked with speed and conviction in its first efforts to support European research and innovation that actually can benefit Europe and the rest of the world. Basically, that is open, that is diverse, and that embraces change. Knowing that most of us, we don't want change. Nobody really wants change. Change hurts, it's difficult. And that's one of the main challenges for a politician, is that how can you translate in words something that people at the bottom of their hearts, they want others to do, they want others to change, but they do not want to change. And in just 1 year, we have shown that the European Union is able of finding new ways to mobilize investment. Investment in high-risk, high-reward innovation projects. And in the beginning, I remember my first conversations with Vice President Katainen and with President Juncker. And I said, if we want to do a big project of investment, it has to be about high risk and high reward. And that is exactly what research in science innovation is about. And just before coming, I checked with my colleagues, so what have we done? And so far, we have in the pipeline more than 1 billion euros in projects in the European Fund for Strategic Investment that are related to research in science and innovation. Then we had another big challenge, and in just 6 months, we were able to establish a new scientific advice mechanism. I know that some of you were skeptical about it, but I'm extremely proud that we were able to get a very diverse group of leading European experts that can be called upon to inform EU policymaking in independent scientific advice. And in a few short months, when I arrived in November, we had a big crisis, the Ebola crisis, and we had to react very quickly. And people around me told me that it was difficult because Horizon 2020 was not designed to be quick. And we were able to actually get it more flexible. We were able to actually get off the ground more than 200 million euros for Ebola at the time, basically from November to January, which was quite remarkable. And so today I'm honored to mark the new and the renewal of this Lund Declaration, a declaration which calls for European research to be freed from its traditional constraints, so that it may have the greatest possible positive impact for society. It's time to embrace the change that comes with a much more ambitious vision for the future. But if that vision is for Europe to benefit from using its research and innovation to solve global challenges, we must first consider that many of our most familiar academic structures and our scientific institutions, if you think about, were established long before science was ever a global endeavor. In the past, individual nations conquered the Everest, achieved the space flight, navigated the poles, and explored the depths of our oceans. Science was defined by one nation's sprint to the finish line after the other. And scientific institutions and their funding were organized according to that. I probably come from one of the countries where that was the run in the 1500s, to be the best at that globalization. So science was somehow a matter of national pride and national security. There was no political need to share data and little economic incentive to do so. But by the turn of the century, those trends had already really given way to a very different, very global dynamic. Probably I was thinking yesterday when I was rereading my speech, probably the most really moment of change was that meeting in 1911 at the Metropole Hotel in Brussels, when Einstein, Curie, Poincaré, and others got together to share their really opening door to the world, and where you actually understood that you would have to go from classical to quantum physics. And that was a meeting that actually defined the way science would be done in the future. And it was in 1911, more than 100 years ago. So new pioneering nations were actually investing in science and education. Science is actually no longer dominated by some elite club of countries. And the challenges were becoming more complex. Whether it was actually chasing the Higgs particle, or finding new drugs for HIV, or maintaining the International Space Station. One by one, the latest frontiers in science proved to be insurmountable without collective effort. It was no longer financially or intellectually viable to reach new frontiers alone. So we focused on physical cooperation. We helped researchers spend time working in different parts of the world, in different countries, in the European research area. Now we take cross-border research cooperation for granted. You know, it's really interesting to look at the past. Now you take that any student in this university will do an Erasmus in another member state. When I told my professors at university in 1993 that I wanted to go and do something called Erasmus in Paris, they said, why would you go to Paris? You stay in Portugal. We have good professors and a good university. I mean, this was 1993. So Europe succeeded in overcoming physical barriers. Where we will still have to work is in adapting to a world in which how we use and contribute knowledge is actually changing. That's why I've made open innovation, open science, and being open to the world the three defining priorities of my mandate, so that European research is best equipped to take on the global challenges of the 21st century. Open innovation is my first priority, because we live in a time when those without access to the traditional establishment are often the ones that are doing the most exciting work. Take the example of a man that I met called Tal Goldsworthy, an engineer from the UK, a boiling engineer that was diagnosed with a Marfan syndrome. He had a problem in his heart, and that his aortic vessel was not working properly. And the doctors told him that he had probably 6 months to live. And he came back home and he said, I have to help the doctors. I'm an engineer, I can do it. And he found a way to solve it. We gave him this year the award for the patient innovation. And he's an amazing man. He has saved more than 150 lives. And more than that, I mean, if you think traditionally, you would have assumed that only a doctor would be in a position to save Tal's life. But his innovation not only did that, it made his recovery quicker, his quality of life much better. But it was groundbreaking. In his team, he has one doctor, one engineer, one IT person, and he was able to solve a medical problem. So those are the people that are shaping the future in terms of science and in terms of innovation. They are the citizens. That's the democratization of innovation, as Professor von Hippel calls it. So over the next 6 months, I'll be exploring how European Innovation Council could help these innovators succeed in bringing European innovation to global markets. And we are innovating in a way we actually finance through the European Fund for Strategic Investment, cooperation with structural funds through a seal of excellence, and proposing a fund of funds as part of the capital markets to leverage more European venture capital. Open science is my second priority, because the days of keeping our research results to ourselves are over. There is far more to gain from sharing data and letting others access and analyze that data. For example, I mean, if sharing big data reveals that a certain kind of cancer activates a particular molecule that gives you a pathway in most cases, and it turns out that there is already a drug approved and available to block the activation of that molecular pathway, clinical trials can begin almost immediately. Save time, money, and lives just because you have open data. Or if scientists want to monitor the effects of climate change on local ecosystems, they can use open science to engage in citizens. You know, in April last year, there was a big earthquake in Nepal. The first teams that get really to the place, they didn't really contact any scientists. They used OpenStreetMap, really an app done by a 24-year-old kid from the UK at the University College of London. More than 2 million users online. That's what they used. That's what they used to actually, in real time, get information for where people were on that earthquake. I mean, this is a big, big change. So to make the most of open science opportunities for Europe, I plan to focus on open data, open access, and research integrity over the course of my mandate. Currently, the Commission is working with the EU member states to launch what we call an open science agenda. And we are considering the merits of developing a European open science cloud, as well as a research integrity initiative. And here I wanted just to tell you, I think it's extremely important that we go ahead with this European science cloud. And you know, we're not going to go ahead with the European science cloud because we think that's European, or that we want to do it in our geography, or that we wanted to do it in Europe to protect ourselves. The European Science Cloud is about the technology, is about what services can we give to our researchers, where can they put their data, where can actually they can get that security. But it's not about Europe protecting itself. So people sometimes asking me, oh, but that's a way of European scientists to be really protected. I mean, you're not protected. You're protected if your technology is superior. And so that's what the European Science Cloud is about. And finally, open to the world. It's my third priority. And as Helen, the minister, was referring, because there are few forces in this world that are engaging and unifying as a scientific endeavor. This year, the EU was granted Finally, observer status for Sesame, home to the first particle accelerator to science diplomacy in the Middle East. And we took the historical step of Horizon 2020 to associate countries like Ukraine and Tunisia. And so it's under this priority that I believe the spirit of Lund and the spirit of the Lund Declaration can have a very significant impact. I also see the potential for joint programming initiatives to become internationally recognized as best practices, involving more partners from around the world. So I call member states to renew their support and to align their national research and innovation activities with that of the joint program initiatives, particularly in areas like health, climate, food, water, and urbanization. Generate new momentum by giving joint programming the political commitment, the opportunities for citizens' engagement, and the investment they need to lead the way in a global research area. Ladies and gentlemen, Carl Sagan also said, and I quote, "The scientific way of thinking is at once imaginative and disciplined. This is central to its success. Science invites us to let the facts in, even when they don't conform to our preconceptions. This kind of thinking is also an essential tool for a democracy in an age of change." So I ask you to consider not only what we must achieve and overcome in linear terms, I ask you to consider what European research should stand for in an age of global change and global responsibility. You have a voice and you have a responsibility, and you should raise your voice as scientists, as really people that the world listens to. So as I see it, Europe must lead by example. Global knowledge to solve global challenges is a web we weave together. With each new strand, it becomes stronger. But there is no way of knowing on whose strand the next dewdrop of inspiration will form, or where the next big idea will land. The only thing we know is actually the words of the former President Shimon Peres. The value of a country is not and will never be measured by the square meters of land, but by the number of scientists per square meter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope, if you don't mind for a second, Commissioner, if you're big on open access and open innovation, you're also open to just a couple of questions. We're a little bit late on the clock. You quoted, as well as a few sage words from Carl Sagan, you also, of course, mentioned Einstein and that famous conference in Brussels. And I wondered if one of the tricks with collaboration is almost to pull off a bit of anti-relativistic thinking. We want to acquire mass without losing velocity. How do we do that?
I think that, I think scientists are probably today an example for all other professions. And that collaboration actually is their daily jobs. What I think is still really not changed is the way education is done in universities. And I think that one of the major problems that we have is these barriers still at university in between different disciplines when kids just start the undergrad. I mean, if you look at the European system, you see that you take a path, you're like 18 years old, and you're supposed to be a professional actor on that field. And that is something that has to change, because the real knowledge will be at the intersection of different disciplines. And you kind of don't let it go. And the big difference when I go and I studied in the US is that in the US you have these barriers much lower, and people can go from discipline to discipline at a very early age. And so you see these people that are doctors, that were social scientists, you see people that were engineers, that at some point decided to be lawyers. And I don't see that yet in Europe. And I think, I mean, this is a challenge for the Minister of Education in every country of Europe. But there's like there's a protectionism also in universities, a mentality that has to be changed. And when I told about this story of myself in 1993, that has changed a lot, of course, it's a reality, still a reality in a lot of the systems. Even with the Bologna system, you feel that people resist. And I want to actually be a bit provocative on that for the university professors.
Provocative is good, that's fine. I mean, it's also, it seems to be picking up on something else the Minister said. I mean, when we always talk about collaboration, but collaboration is not just bringing a bunch of people together. There are skills in collaboration, and we don't seem to have, we haven't learnt how to do it. You just don't just have one person plus one person, one organisation plus one organisation. There are new techniques needed. How do we get that into the system without acquiring yet more levels of bureaucracy?
Yeah, of course. I think, I mean, there's a professor at the Harvard Business School that has studied that for 20 years. Her name is Linda Hill. And she says that diverse groups of teams with diversity, religious, different countries, different creeds, different beliefs, there's like two paths. Or they work much better than all the other teams, or they don't work at all. And you have to be patient with those teams, because when you get people from different backgrounds, it's much difficult to get it off the ground. But when you get it off the ground, it's much better. And so she calls it like creative abrasion, you know. And so as a leader, you have to set up the scene and the stage for people to be able to hire in those fields of creative abrasion, which is actually amplifying differences. And one of the things that you find sometimes in some European cultures, or in European cultures, is that you want to be non-confrontational. You want to be in agreement. And that kind of environments don't actually get the collaboration going in, because you have to have that abrasion, that amplification of differences without getting into chaos.
Exactly. Just saying yes
without being chaotic. I mean, of course, I mean, you have to have some discipline over that.
Okay, we have to be disciplined with time, but one last one. You've talked about the European Innovation Council. You've also talked about how Horizon 2020 wasn't designed to be quick, but we were able to adapt it in the case of Ebola to be quick. Can we be sure that the European, I'll get it right, we'll just call it the Eurovation Council. The European Innovation Council will be, no, it's not my job to name things. We'll talk about the European Innovation Council will not add another layer, but actually speed things up. How can we be sure that it's not going to be something that gets in the way, but actually does the job?
No, I think that the European Innovation Council, the basic idea is to really have a bottom-up approach. So it's not to create any other council with another building and people and layers. It's about, one, streamlining what we have, because what I feel is that if you are a top researcher, you can actually, and you know where to knock the door. I mean, you know that you have the European Research Council. You know that you can actually do what you feel it's the right thing. If you are an innovator and you come to Europe, you don't know where to go. You have different instruments. You have the SME instrument, the fast track to innovation. Then you go there, and then it's not that one. You go to another one. So the first part is how you streamline, and then you will have a way of getting it more like the ERC in terms of getting instruments that you don't tell people what to do. They tell you what they want to do. And I think that's the big thing that started with Horizon 2020. It was very well crafted on the research and the fundamental research part, and I think that I can try to add value with my team and my Director General, Robert Jan-Smits, that's somewhere there, to actually add value and change a little bit of the innovation side to be more bottom-up. So at the end of the day, it's just that. It's as simple as that.
Okay, well, thank you for adding value today, Commissioner Carlos Moedas. Thank you.